The Coast S1. So 3 things to like with the shoe. Number one, I have thoroughly enjoyed the midsole of this model. So the light cell midsole material in this shoe does a good job of giving you a nice level of pop. It's not the most flexible in the market, but I think in the sense of giving you a nice responsive ride from both a forefoot, midfoot, or even heel striking position, this model does a good job at just giving you a nice pop. And so on the spectrum on Mount Coast site, they have the shoes being a little bit more plush. However, compared to the other running shoes that I've reviewed as of lately, I actually think this midsole has way more pop to it than probably given credit to. Granted, that might be in comparison to other Mount Coast models, but I think if you're somebody who's big on having a midsole in your running shoe that has a nice poppy feel to it for short runs or faster bouts of running, this can be a great option to look into. The second thing to like with this model is I think if you're like me and you're more of a recreational lifting bro who likes to run, so my running every week is like 10 to 15 miles, this can be a great generalist option. It's comfortable for slower runs, it's comfortable for faster runs, and I think it does have a nice stability to it. So if you're somebody that likes a more neutral shoe, this model can be a great option to look into. It's kind of a catch-all, I think, for more generalist folks. The R1 I know is built for longer runs, and it's funny because on the S1 page, it's like, this is for 100 kilometers and down. And I'm like, in no world would I ever run 100 kilometers, but I will run 3 to 5 miles here and there depending on my training schedule, and I like to sprinkle in intervals. So if that's you as well, I think you'll enjoy this model. The third thing to like with this shoe is the upper construction. So I really like the jacquard mesh upper in the shoe. It gives you a nice secure feeling, and even if I want to crank these down if I'm doing sprints or wear them a smidge looser for just walking the pup and then maybe going for a slow run, this model does a good job at staying secure on my foot. I think if you have a more medium to slightly wider foot like myself as well, this will also feel like a glove on your foot. I have an E to double E with foot and a normal arch, and this model fits me pretty well. Now I do wish the toe box was a little bit wider, and I'll talk about that in my cons, but for the most part, I have really enjoyed the upper security of the shoe and just how it's moved with my foot and broken in over time. This model also didn't really have a long break-in time, which is also a perk of this shoe. But now let's talk about a couple of cons that I have with the S1. So 2 cons that I could see folks having with the S1 is number 1, if you need more width in your toe box and your midfoot, you may not resonate with this model. You do have a taper here from the midfoot into the forefoot and a taper up here in the toe box. And again, like I have an E to double E with foot, and with thicker socks, I do start to notice the upper in the shoe. However, I think if you have a 3E plus with foot, this model might feel a little bit snug, especially with this TPU overlay. You'll probably feel a little bit more friction here on the lateral side of this model. And for flat feet, you might feel the arch more in this shoe as well. So keep that in mind before you buy them. And if you do buy them, make sure you keep them in good condition so you can return them if you need to swap them out. The second con that I have with this model, and this is more of just like a performance type of thing, is if you like a flatter shoe, this model has a 10mm drop. I think you will feel that slightly more pitch forward feeling in the shoe. So if you're used to an Ultra, or if you're used to a shoe with a 6mm drop or below, or if you train in a shoe with that drop and you want something that's consistent with that, this might not be your best bet. I don't mind the drop, and I actually like having a slightly higher drop when I'm doing faster runs. So it's not necessarily a true con on the shoe, it's just a context that might not make sense based on your needs, and you'll want to keep that in mind. So despite all of the hype on social media with this model, definitely make sure these specs of the heel to toe drop and fit of the shoe align with your needs before you invest in this model. When it comes to the performance of the S1, I'll discuss how this shoe does for sprints, short runs ranging from 1 to 5 miles, and then also walking. If you need to know about the shoe for ultras or marathon distances, I am not your guy for that. That is not how I train, and you'll want to find somebody who's much more dialed in with the running for that. So just forewarning there, this is much more of a generalist review regarding how this shoe performs. Now, when it comes to sprints, I have really liked this model, and there are 2 contexts where I've really enjoyed this shoe for sprints the most. Number 1 on a curved treadmill, and then number 2 on a hill. So that's how and where I will generally sprint, and in all of those contexts, I really love the forefoot of the shoe and how it gives you pop. Like even now, you can see that this bend isn't like kind of collapsing. It kind of fights back against my hand and gives you a nice bouncy feel. And so for sprints where you're primarily in the forefoot and really digging in, you also get a good level of outsole tread and pop to blend in this nice responsive poppy feel. So for sprinting context, I've really enjoyed this shoe. It also doesn't feel so bulky that it kind of slows you down. So unlike other running shoes that do have slightly thicker stack heights like this model, it doesn't necessarily feel clunky on your feet, which I personally love. When it comes to shorter runs, this model has done an exceptional job as well. And now for running paces and context here, my pace will vary a lot. And so what I try to do is I try to stay around like 8 to 9 minutes of pacing for my miles. Now I will increase the speed here and there for intervals throughout, and then I'll also slow down if I'm trying to have more of a recovery chill day. In all of those running paces and contexts, the shoe has done a good job. When I'm a bit more fast with my pacing, I'm a bit more of a forefoot and midfoot striker, and then when I slow down, I'm a bit more of a heel striker. I have long legs. And in none of those contexts does this model feel overly uncomfortable, and I also do like the little bit of arch that you get with the shoe. I find that when I'm getting more fatigued or I've just had a 2-a-day and I'm really tired from my afternoon or evening run, this model does a good job of kind of supporting my foot when I'm feeling a bit more fatigued. So I do like that about this shoe. And again, I think if you're a generalist, this can really be that good catch-all shoe to kind of tie everything in together. Now again, this model does have a 10mm drop. So if you are somebody that wants that generalist running shoe with a flatter feel on your foot, this will not be your best bet. When it comes to walking, can you walk in this shoe? Absolutely, it's pretty comfortable. The upper is okay regarding breathability. If you wear them all day, I have traveled in this shoe and worn them for longer dog walks and running errands, and they've done a pretty good job. My only issue with walking in this shoe is that if you want this shoe to last, you might want to be conscious of how much you're walking in them, just because you do have exposed foam here with this outsole break and the foam up here in the forefoot and midfoot. And so if you're walking, for example, on damp days, or if you're walking like around muddy surfaces outdoors and it's wet, you might want to be conscious of not having that to kind of get into this midsole here. This can kind of break down shoes faster. And this is not just an S1 issue, this is all shoes with breaks in the outsoles where you're gonna have more foam exposed. So just keep that in mind. But from a walking context, this shoe is comfortable. And if you don't necessarily care about having them go as long as possible for just running, you can wear them for walks and then also runs, and they feel really good for both contexts. Now, when it comes to sprints, I'd give this shoe a strong 8.5 out of 10. For short runs, a strong 9 out of 10. Again, I've really enjoyed how the midsole has held up. It doesn't feel overly plush. It doesn't feel dead after a good amount of running in this model. And then for walking, I'd give this shoe a 7.5 out of 10. Not necessarily my favorite running shoe for walking if I'm going to wear a shoe for that context, but it can get the job done in the daily wear realm if that's what you're after. When it comes to the price of the S1, you can expect to pay $150. Now, pro tip, sign up for the email list and you get some money off. I believe it takes off $10 on the shoe. At least that's what I did when I bought this model. $150 for this model. I think if you are a more dedicated runner or a generalist like me, I think that price point does make sense. It puts it in the same price point as a lot of different running shoes that you'll pay for from different companies that are a lot bigger and more established. So $150 for this model, I think is fair for what you get. All right, so now who should buy the Mount to Coast S1? Number one, if you are a generalist like me or more of a hybrid style person with your lifting, and then you also just do some running more casually on a weekly basis, this can be a good option to go with. Number two, if you're somebody that wants a running shoe that has a slight bias towards sprints and faster paced runs, I think this can be a good option to go with. This midsole has been exceptionally poppy and responsive once again, and if you're a forefoot or midfoot striker, I think you'll really vibe with this shoe's feel on the feet. The third context is if you're somebody that likes a little bit of arch support in your shoe and you have a medium to slightly wider foot width, this can be a great option to look into. Now, who shouldn't buy this shoe? Number one, if you have a 3E plus width foot, you might want to steer clear of the shoe. You might not have enough width. And then number two, if you have a flatter foot and you want more room in your midfoot to let your arch collapse and do its thing while you're running, this might not be the best option for your needs as well. And then number three, if you're somebody that wants a running shoe primarily for walking with some running, then you might want to find a different running shoe for that as well that you kind of beat up and just feels a little bit more plush for a daily wear context. All right, so when it comes to sizing and fit of the Mount to Coast S1, I think most folks should be safe going true to size in this model. Again, I have a normal arch and I also have an E to double E with foot. This model fits me pretty true to size. If I wear a thinner sock or a thicker sock, I don't really feel like I'm running in to the end of the toe box. Now, I do pick up on this TPU overlay on the lateral side of the shoe when I do wear a thicker sock. So again, if you have wider feet and you do like a boxier toe box with your running shoes, definitely keep that in mind. But for most folks, I think true to size should be the safe call in this model. All right, so let's cover the weight, heel toe drop, and insole in the S1. For my size 10 shoe here, we have a weight of 9.85 ounces. The heel to toe drop in the shoe sits at 10 millimeters, and this model does have a thin foam removable insole. All right, so now let's break down the construction of the S1. Up here on the toe box, you have an extended outsole layer that wraps up, and then you also have this TPU overlay that covers the toe box to help give you additional durability and rigidity up here through the toe. You also have a light internal toe guard here. This toe has a bit more structure to it, and that's also why I kind of like this shoe for faster paced runs. You get good lockdown in the shoe, you never really feel like you're spilling over. You have this jacquard mesh upper that runs out the forefoot into the midfoot, and then back here in the boot, you also have a mesh material and you have some padding throughout, so you get good lockdown in this shoe, and you have a nice cup in this model to also help lock your heel down as well. Looking at the midfoot and the lacing system, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 core eyelets that go up with a 7th back here for lace lock. The tongue has a lower gusset to it, and it has additional loop here for security. The tongue, I thought, did a pretty good job at staying in place, and the tongue itself has a padded mesh build to it with some Mount to Coast branding up here at the top of the tongue as well. And then looking at the boot, you have this external heel tab here. This is kind of cool actually with the branding. It has an M and a C over here. I think that's pretty neat from a branding standpoint. And this tab doesn't really hang off. It kind of stretches and then it goes back in. So I like that as a nice, like, kind of more quality of life touch with this model. Now looking at the midsole, the primary material is this light cell foam. It has a lot of pop to it, and then you also have a zero sag insert in the shoe. That's designed to help the shoe remain a little bit more lively for longer runs, and then you have a TPU plate back here for additional support in the heel. So this plate right here, you can kind of see on the lateral medial side, this kind of inserts and interjects into the heel, and that gives the heel a little bit more stability and pop as well. And then you have some Mount to Coast branding here on the lateral heel of the shoe as well. And then the last point to call out with the shoe sole construction is you have the Go Flow midsole tack. That's designed to help give the shoe a bit more geometry regarding your stride. Looking at the outsole, you have a rubber tread that covers the forefoot, midfoot, and then back here in the heel. You have some breaks here where you have some exposed foam. So again, if you're walking on damp or muddy surfaces, be very conscious of that. And then looking at the insole of this shoe, you do have a thin foam removal insole. There is some breathability and ventilation in this insole as well. But if you have additional questions on the construction of the S1, drop a comment down below. All right, that wraps up my review of the Mount to Coast S1. Now, would I buy this shoe again? Honestly, yes. I have been thoroughly impressed with this shoe. I figured it was going to be like an Instagram shoe that, you know, had a lot of marketing behind it, but didn't really perform up to stuff. But this model has been really solid, and I've been very happy with it for my asks. If you have additional questions on the S1, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, y'all, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.